Friday, December 3rd, 1964. And I've been asked a couple of times already, trying to figure it out. I got sober just before my 25th birthday, and that tells you I'm 70 years old. And Bob here is a lot older than I am. We got there's somebody over here in the corner that can't hear, Rusty. Louder. Is that better? I got to really be careful what I say.
Right.
When Bob and I heard about coming out here and do this together, one of the primary reasons I came was to be here with Bob. We've been longtime friends in AA. We ran all over the Denver area in a fellowship of us that was probably one of the more important things we got to talk about. Where we were together at meetings, and after meetings, we're in each other's homes eating. We went on 12-step calls together. We did this fellowship all the time together. But we've not been on the podium together after all these years. So it's a twofold event for me, and I'm delighted to be here. I'll go ahead and do what we talked about, Bob, and then you can do it. Let's just kind of get a group conscious here. We've got a number of people here, and I hope a number of new people. With that, we got roughly 8 hours to go through 12 steps, and we're trying to figure out how the hell to do it. So I would just like some kind of conscience from the group, and maybe 3 or 4 of you can tell me why you came here. What's your reason for here? What is it that you think you'd like to hear? And we'll try to go there unless we think your idea is not a good idea, and then we won't. Over here.
I would really like to know how you continue to do step work after years of sobriety, having finished the steps, the 10, 11, and 12, or what you do to. I guess I'm really interested in getting. When I finished my 9th step, I felt fabulous. I feel pretty good today, but I'd like to live in a state just like when I finished my 9th step.
Right.
Wouldn't we all? Anybody else? Thank you. Herb.
I'm Herb. I'm an alcoholic.
Herb.
And I've known Gary for a while. I've never met Bob, but I've heard about him. And I'm very interested in hearing about some of the experience from the beginning. I really like the history, but not to focus too much on that. I'd really like to know how you guys have changed and what it's like now as a result of staying gently pressed up against this thing all these years.
Could you repeat the question?
All you didn't hear that. Basically, Herb was asking us to talk about our beginning and the steps and how we fell into it and how we got to doing it. And then secondly, how we've managed to stay into it up until today. So we're closely on the same thing here so far. Maybe a little more effort on the first step. Saw some hands over here. Young lady? Come on. Okay. We knew we were going to have to spend some time on that. Yes, ma'am?
I was just hoping to get clarity on 6 and 7.
Yeah, I'd kind of like that myself. Okay.
It's a good thing I'm here.
That's your answer?
Not really.
Oh, she wanted clarity on steps 6 and 7. So Bob's going to straighten us out.
No.
And that's a great question. It's a wonderful question. We'll get to that. Sir?
My name's Richard. I'm an alcoholic.
Richard.
I just want to
Well, my name is Bob Olson, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the Happy Way group in Englewood, Colorado. My sobriety date is May 28th of 1973. And I need to be really careful because this is my grand sponsor. Even though I'm much older than he is, the better part of a whole year. I've just led a harder life. Well, Gary's right. When I came to Denver originally, I was a year sober, and I'd been in a group in a little town in Wisconsin, and we didn't know much about steps at all. In fact, I don't know that we knew anything about steps. And I was about, I knew I was going to drink again, and I didn't know how to not do that. So, sometimes God, in fact, more often than not, God will give us grace when we come into this program. But at some point, we have to learn what the truth is and start exercising the truth. And God's kind enough and gracious enough to bring us to a point where we will be presented with the truth at some point. And I was presented with the truth by these guys. Gary was sponsoring another guy named Don Pritz, and Don Pritz became my sponsor. And we just flat hung out together all the time. Now, Gary and a couple of other guys, a guy named Ernie and Don and a couple of Dons really, and some other guys were already involved in the book, but I think like the catalyst for me was a convention in 1975, and we were, I think, were we all? I know that we were on the hospitality committee, and Lois Wilson was there. She was talking, and then this guy from Canada got up named Mac Cheater. He was from Winnipeg, and he talked about the Golden Slipper group, and we were all fascinated by what he was saying because he said that group could never really stay sober, and then they had made a decision to take a whole new approach towards Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was to start at the forward to the first edition where it said to show others precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. And they started right there, and they did everything it said to do, and they did it as a group. And we'd never heard, at least I had never heard anything like that before. And afterwards, there were 14 of us that, to the best of my knowledge, that got together in this guy's basement. His name was Jay Levy. He's passed on now. And we got together in his basement, and we did exactly what Mac Cheater had suggested. And it was just amazing. To the best of my knowledge, only one person out of that group ever drank. That's 35 years ago or 34 years ago. And that guy died. Yeah, he froze to death in a doorway down on the Skid Row in Denver. So, in terms of catalyst, I'm not sure what Gary's experience was with that, but I can tell you that my experience was an absolute fascination with what can happen if you follow the directions. So, all of a sudden my life really started changing. My perception started changing. Everything started changing. And I came to the conclusion that Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual adventure. In that we have this great opportunity to live life that's meaningful. I think that a lot of people spend a great deal of time trying to figure out how to make their life meaningful. And about 15 years ago, I was floating in and out of a coma at a hospital in Littleton, and trying to figure out if my life had made any difference at all. And see, I think an awful lot of you are going to have the same experience where you're going to reach a crisis point in your life and you're going to have the opportunity to reflect and to say, well, I've been around here for all of these years. Is this world one iota different for my having been here? And you're going to have to answer that question. And so all that did was reaffirm what I already knew, which is our real purpose is to carry this message, to go out and help other people, to make other people's lives better. And the whole idea about I want to get rich and I want to get laid is bullshit. I mean, it'd be nice. But the truth is that our real purpose here came to me in no uncertain terms, and that is that our real purpose here is to make this world better. And we have this unique opportunity to carry a message that was given to us. And that whole catalyst was brought to me in 1975 at that convention. So how do you do that? You be clear. You be unafraid. You know, sometimes carrying this message will make you unpopular, especially to people that don't want it. And Alcoholics Anonymous is full of people that don't want it. They want to come in here and run the same bullshit they've been running all their lives. And the real truth is that there's so much more here. Here's one thing I want to say in the beginning, and that is that I am absolutely certain that you can get as well as you want to get. It just takes some work. Now, if you're adverse to work, that's your problem. And I know that it's a scary proposition to go looking for who you are. But the truth is that there are so many benefits in this thing. Spiritually, emotionally, physically, there are benefits in this that go across the whole realm of our lives. And you can go as far as you want with this. Now, I've been doing the steps once a year for almost 37 years now. And I have no scars for having done that. And as a consequence, the book talks about growing in understanding and effectiveness, and that process doesn't stop. You know, we get well enough to see how sick we were, and we learn enough to see how little we know, and then the process repeats itself. And so there's no end to this. There's no end game here. We can't arrive at something. This is so all we can do is we can continue to try and live a life that's pleasing to God. And as we do that, you know, we learn how to live with principles, and we learn how to stand up for ourselves, and we learn how to have the courage of our convictions, and we learn how to take risks. So I want to be real clear about this. If you want to really keep working and finding out more about God and more about yourself, and finding out where all the lies are, because most people think inventory is about finding the truth, and I think it's about finding the lies. If you want to get closer to the bottom of the truth, just keep doing this. You aren't going to wear it out. Speaking of, I don't even want to go there. So that was a catalyst anyway, for me was a convention in 1975, and we were all inspired, and we were all full of pea and vinegar, and we were going to go out and man, you really, when a whole group of us were coming around, you had to get out of the way. Either get with it or get gone. And I think there's virtue in that. So anyway, that's enough out of me for a while. So, Jerry.
One of the reasons I wanted to be here, because I think Bob explains some things better than anybody else I know. I was 4 years sober when I ended up in Denver. I'd been dry in Wyoming and listened to some real bullshit for the program. Smelled a little bit of it now I think about it. And as I look back on it, I was really foggy, even at 4 years sober. And the longer I'm sober, the longer the fogginess seemed to exist. But I would sit in meetings, and I would listen to stuff, and I really hadn't done anything yet other than go to meetings and make coffee, and somehow I had survived it to get to Denver, and they were talking a whole different story, and they were talking 90 meetings in 90 days. Hell and Laramie, to have been able to have done that, I'd have driven, 10,000 miles and to do it. And kind of like L.A., if you want to run around town. But, like we did this weekend, huh, Sheldon? So when I got there, I was attracted by an odd number there. I went to a lot of meetings in Denver and would look around and seemed to be welcomed greatly because I was young and wasn't it great? I'd got a hold of this deal so young and didn't have to go through all the stuff they went through. And I think, these no good. They don't know. I just stand there dying. I really don't have another one left. I don't know that I'm going to survive sobriety. I'm not. And so it was. That didn't attract me much at all. I didn't like being pandered to. And the more we ended up, and we started the young people's group, and it stopped right away, right there. Nobody was overjoyed that I was there, I don't think. But I was attracted to the people that seemed to have something that irritated everybody else. And that's true. I mean, those are the guys that we've been attracted to, and Bob and I were talking about this at breakfast this morning. Those are the guys that always got my attention, because if they had gone through the big book, they came out and they spoke in meetings or one-on-one, and they had some confidence you don't see in other people. And yeah, a lot of people don't like that, but tough. But they're the ones that attracted me. And so I somehow caught on through that, and I don't know if I can give you the whole dialogue, but I was attracted to them and went around them, and when the idea was to go through the book that we'd heard at the state convention, it made sense. Now, at that point in time, up until that happened, I had known that the answer's in the steps. Okay, I just knew that. And I'm not sure why, but I was really looking for a nice, easy way to do that, and so I was trying Hazelden guides to shit and 12 and 12 and all of that, and really getting nowhere. But I knew the answer was the steps, and so when this came up, it was just the natural thing to do. I don't really remember much logic about it. I know that by the time that point had reached in my life, there was no doubt that I was an alcoholic. And there, nor has there been since. I'm not an ANDA. I'm an alcoholic. I've yet to smoke a joint or pop a pill for any illicit reason or any of that stuff. I don't relate to it. It's not alcoholism in my mind. And that's a confusing thing to say when anybody comes in that has done an awful lot of alcohol and other drugs and everything else. But it's still very clear in my mind that I'm a real alcoholic. And the first time I saw that in the book, I latched onto that line, and I like going into some meetings and treatment centers and saying I'm a real alcoholic. That's fun. So anyway, when we got through doing that, and I finally got through those steps with those guys, and we had the experiences together, I somehow had that confidence, much more of it than I had before. And I had the freedom to do some things with that. But it was shortly after we did all that I moved to Indiana. And so my experience since then was different than yours. And what we've done, and I can share that. But I do remember, as we were moving on in that, and I remember when we started the fourth chapter, and you got the line in there that says we must find a power greater than ourselves, and then it says, well, that's exactly what this book is about, to enable us to find a power greater than ourselves that can solve our problem. And I was discouraged to see that, because I had seen other people who claimed to have some kind of power like that, and I didn't like the way they behaved. They didn't want me to do the things I wanted to do, and but I really didn't argue with it. I knew there was something there. I'm watching things go on in the groups, where people are coming in and changing, and I've been sober for a while, but I would see people come in, and I didn't notice that I had any sense that I'd been sober longer than they had. I mean, I knew I did, but these people were saying things and experiencing things that I knew I was supposed to experience, and I hadn't yet. And they hadn't been sober as long as I had been. And so it was clear to me that meetings, and that shit just ain't all the answer. That's a very small part of it. I heard a guy say the other day that, isn't it interesting, when he came in, the steps were required and the meetings were optional. And that's something to think about, isn't it? So my second step experience was very much watching God help other drunks get sober. And I watched them change their lives. I watched them start paying their child support, or watch Dick Daly go down to the courthouse and see the district attorney and say, I got to start paying back on my kids. And my wife will send me to jail if I do. And he had to make arrangements to do that. And just watched all this stuff go on. And then Dick started to blossom. And we watched all that. And you talk to these guys about what was going on, and they're blaming it on God. So that was very much just a part of my second step. It's not that I was a disbeliever when I came in. I was just stupid. I had been around families out where I'd been raised who had. There was a Mormon family. My dad used to go ask them to pray for rain when we were in the middle of a drought, and sometimes it rained. And so it's not that I disbelieved it. I guess I just thought I was aloof from it or something. But that changed watching what was going to happen with me. Now, looking back on my first step today and my second step compared to back like that, I am certainly even more convinced today that left to my own devices, I'm a dead man. I cannot keep myself sober. And I cannot manage my day, and that God can and will if I let Him. And there's probably some profound shit I could say about that, but I hope not, because it's really that simple for me, and that's been that way all these years. Go ahead.
Don't you find it amusing that he and I were part of the Denver Young People's Group? We really were. It was. I think the longer I'm sober, the longer I understand some of the things that the book says about coming to terms with our alcoholism, and there are some things that are specific to people like us. One of them is the phenomenon of craving. I don't know, if you're drunk like I am and you take a drink, something happens that doesn't happen with normal people. When I take a drink, all I can think about is taking another drink. And just some regular person will take a drink and walk away. I've got a son that does that, or I've got several sons that do that, and I don't understand it. I mean, I take a drink and I'm obsessed, and then I have no sense of where that's going to go. I lose all perspective. I can't remember. All of a sudden, my memory fades. All of those times that I had taken a drink before and things went to hell in a handbasket, and I wound up in all kinds of places that I didn't want to be at with people I didn't want to be with. All of a sudden, I can't remember that. All I can think of is, I bet another one would be good. If you're an alcoholic, that's what happens. And then there's another description in the book that says that we lost the power of choice. Yeah, I don't think it's that funny. Jesus, I mean, when I got up in the morning, my idea was, gee, I think I'll really screw this day up good. My idea when I got up in the morning, for the most part, was, God, I hope I don't drink again today. But I knew at some point during the day that I had to. It wasn't like I had a choice in the middle of it. At some point, I had to drink, and that's losing the power of choice. So, at some point during the day, I had to take a drink. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There's a lot of people argue with. Maybe even Gary will. I'm scared. Shut. I think I had a first step before I ever got to Alcoholics Anonymous. My life was so messed up by alcohol that I had reached a point where I knew it was going to kill me. I mean, people in my family have been dying from alcoholism ever since they got here from Norway. And so I watched my dad dying from alcoholism, and I watched all these other people dying from alcoholism, and that's what I thought it was. I just figured we all died before we were 40. And I figured the same thing was going to happen to me. And I don't even know why I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I didn't think it was going to work. And I went to meetings for 5 years before I got sober. And I'm not happy to tell you that. I wish I would have walked through the doors and got magically cured and all that. But I'm too big a skeptic. My idea is this shit ain't going to work for me. And so I went around to Alcoholics Anonymous, and half the time I went drunk, half the time I got drunk on the way home. And I didn't, I'd sit in there and listen to them talk and go, I have no idea who these people are. And then I got so sick. By the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, my liver was sticking out of my side. Doctors said that your chances of a heart attack or a stroke are 80% in the next 4 years, but the problem is you can't scare a drunk. I mean, you can sit in an AA meeting all day with a new drunk and go, you're going to die. They're going to go, uh-huh. Sometimes it's a pleasure to get the hell out of here. That's why you can't scare a drunk. Because by the time they get here, their life's so damn miserable they don't have any other choice. That's the gift of desperation. So, I didn't think it was going to work, and it didn't for a long time. And I'm no 90-day wonder in Alcoholics Anonymous. I kept, I don't want to tell you what my idea is about life in general or what it was back then, but it starts with FY. And that was my attitude about everything. And then finally, when I got so sick that I reached a point that the book describes. And I wish everybody got to that point, and that is when if you take another drink, it's going to kill you. And I'm not talking about in the next 3 weeks. I'm talking about today. And I reached a point where if I took another drink, I knew it was going to kill me, and I would not survive the day. And the bad part was that if I didn't take another drink, it was going to kill me. And there's no hope in that position, because either way you're going to die. And these two guys 12-stepped me and sat me down in front of a priest, and they didn't have treatment centers around back then. So when they got done talking to me, they took me home and left me. And for the next 48 hours, I jumped around like a fish out of water, knowing every minute I was going to die. And I would encourage, I wish everyone got to have that experience. Because I guarantee you that you would have real respect for alcoholism. And then these guys, I don't know, I thought it was not very nice of them. They came back after about 48 hours to see if I was still breathing. And then they took me back and sat me down in front of this priest who ran a halfway house again. I don't have any doubts about my alcoholism. Do you know that statistically something I think over 90% of the people that are coming into Alcoholics Anonymous these days have had some experience with drugs? Okay? So as Gary said, the line gets blurred a little bit, but I'm clear about what I am. Now, I'll tell you a funny thing. I was taking prescription drugs, which doesn't make me any better or worse than anybody else, but I had like 6 open-ended prescriptions for Tranks and all this stuff. And I used to use them so I wouldn't go into DTs in the morning. But when I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous and went through the steps, all the rest of that stuff went away. I have no fascination for anything that I used to use. So once I addressed my alcoholism, everything else went away. Gary was talking about his experience with the second step. My first second step experience was my sponsor coming up to me and saying, "Why are you sober?" I was sober about 90 days. I was still sitting on my hands in meetings. I was sweating so hard. Jesus, I don't know where all that stuff came from, but I used to just sweat out a whole shirt. I mean, it'd just all get wet. I could wring out a shirt after when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, people wouldn't look at me. I was wondering why everybody was avoiding. I'd look at them and they'd be looking somewhere else. And I think I was so sick I made them nervous. I don't think they wanted to look at me. And people just tried to, they wouldn't ask me, they'd never let me talk in meetings, but I couldn't say anything anyway. But they wouldn't, and after you were sober 90 days in this little town, then you'd been sober long enough to chair a meeting. And so the Wednesday group, they said, and everybody else in that group had chaired the meeting, small town, small meetings. And everybody else had chaired the meeting, and so when it came around for the chairmanship again, where you had to be sober, or where you chaired it for 90 days straight, they said, well, we're going to take nominations for our new chairman. And my sponsor got up and said, how about letting Bob chair the meeting for the next 90 days? And this other guy jumped up and said, we need to talk about that. And this other guy jumped up right after him and he said, that's a really good idea. We need to talk about this. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell's going on here? And then this guy who said that they ought to talk about it said, Bob, why don't you go outside and smoke a cigarette? So I said, okay. And now my mind's working, right? So I'm going outside to smoke a cigarette and wondering where I can find an automatic weapon. And then I came back in, and my sponsor was smiling at me, and he said, well, you get to be the chairman for the next 90 days. And so I was. And I didn't drink the next 90 days because I wouldn't let those sons of bitches see me drunk. That's not a very good reason, is it? I mean, why? You know, God works in funny ways, and my anger kept me sober for 90 days in one of the most critical times in my sobriety. I didn't have the steps to rely on or anything else. I just had anger. And that's a dubious luxury, as the book says. But at that point in time, God used it to keep me sober. And so when my sponsor said, why are you sober? I said, it's because I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, bullshit. You've been hanging around AA for 5 years and you never got sober before. What's the difference? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, are you eating differently? And I said, no. And he said, are you on some kind of a diet? And I said, no. And he said, are you exercising? And I said, no. And he said, are you going to work every day? And I said, no. And he said, well, what are you doing differently? And I said, leave it alone. I don't know what the hell I'm doing differently. Just drop it. And he said, are you praying? And I said, yeah. And he said, you do that before? And I said, no. And he said, would you concede that you're sober today by the grace of a God you don't even believe in? Ouch. And that made me look at God. And then this priest that I used to go fishing with, that they had put me in front of originally, kept going, so what do you think about God today, Bob? And I go, I'm trying not to. And he said, well, think about it. Think about it. See, and he was the guy in the beginning that said, can you stop drinking? And I said, no. And he said, I got bad news for you. And I said, what's that? And he said, we can't stop you either. There aren't enough people in this city to stop you from drinking if you want another drink. And I said, all right. And I'm sitting there going, well, let's see. We've just established that I can't drink. I can't stop drinking. And he just told me they can't stop me. So what the hell am I doing here? And then this priest said, well, there better be a God or your game's over. And he was right. Now, I get that kind of logic. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. So I'm sitting there going, I'm going to die from this thing, and it may take some time, and it's painful and all the rest of that stuff. And I can't stop. And now all of a sudden we got, my only hope is a willingness to believe. If that's my only hope, I'm going there. Okay? When we are faced with no alternatives, we'll take the path. Now, there are a few that don't, and I think those are the toughest people. Okay? I think the toughest drunks die because they flat won't give up. And for us to survive this disease, we have to give up. And these really tough people out there, they just cave in and die. And for folks like us, at some point we go, I get it. I can't take any more pain. I don't care what the alternative is. I'm going for it. Okay? And that's what I did. And then I found out that that's where I should have been all the time. And then I found out there was a loving God who could change my life, and I didn't have to live in the anger and frustration and despair and all those things that I lived in any longer if I didn't want to. And that I could stop being the king of the world. And I could just walk in the valley and say, Guy's running the shows up there. And I don't have the responsibility of running any show. And that it's only by the grace of God that I have a wonderful life today. And see, when I came in here, there was nothing left for me. I'd burned all the bridges, broken all the relationships, had a wife that hated me, had kids that were afraid of me, had an employer that was trying to fire me. My life was basically over. And all of a sudden there was hope, there was change, there was a whole new life to live. No, I was 35 years old when I got sober, and I've been sober for 36 years. And I have had the opportunity to live a whole other life. And you can have the same thing. I don't care how old you are or where you start from, what you did, where you've been. I don't give a shit about any of that. There's hope for all of us. And your life can change as radically as mine did. Now, most of the time when I was drinking, people described me as being crazy. I had a tendency to be violent. I was so good at it that I worked for gangsters in Chicago. I did all sorts of things. When people said something about Bob Olson, other people would say, "See, he's nuts." And today, I'm one of the largest providers of psychiatric care for the Colorado Department of Corrections. And so God has a sense of humor. So anyway, that was my experience. I came to believe in that, and over time your belief deepens until you understand that God's running everything. And the idea that I have control over anything is an illusion. Personal power is an illusion. Control is an illusion. The longer you're sober, the more you find that out. And the idea that you run around thinking you're terribly powerful and you can move the world, that's delusional. Okay? I have a chance to worship God today. I am privileged to worship God today. And it took me a long time to get to that. Thanks.
I was just thinking, when I arrived in Denver, I'd been dry for those 4 years in Laramie, going to college and going to meetings and doing that. But I had been through 4 years of the most pain I'd ever had in my life. I don't do sobriety well. Left to my own devices, it's just awful. It's just horrible. The worst thing you can do to an alcoholic is dry him out and let him just stand there. Somehow I had survived it till till we got involved in the booking of steps in Denver with the grinding in my gut going on every day. Still using my old techniques to survive. That meant I was still intentionally writing bad checks. I was still chasing women I shouldn't be chasing. I was doing everything I could to get a moment's relief, except follow the directions. And I don't remember anybody giving me the directions before I got to Denver, but they might have been. So by the time this all happened, the experience that started with us, I was ready for it. And I often describe my time when the first time I got enough to drink at 16 years old. I was a 16-year-old that by God needed a drink, because the grinding in my gut had been going on since I could remember. And it was. And so the first thing attracted to me to that, when I saw some confidence going on and all that, is I knew those people didn't have the hole in their belly. They wasn't going on with that. And so I was faced with two things. Yeah, I was completely convinced I was a real alcoholic. And I was also convinced that I couldn't go on the way I was doing. I just couldn't do it. And so coming to believe seemed to happen for me at that point. But I attended a meeting one time, and somebody asked if you really hit your bottom before you stop drinking or after you stop drinking. And I can tell you, in my case, it might have been both. Because when I stopped drinking, I was so sick they locked me in that little room in that house and had a window in the door about like that. And I'd look up, and everybody, once in a while, somebody's nose would be smashed up against that glass because they're in there observing me. And just thought I'd throw that out. There better be a God if you're living that life, and we're coming into that. And I don't remember consciously seeking exact that, but that explained what I was going through. Man, there better be a God. I can't do this shit anymore. And I can't do it. And so then when we moved on into the second step, and I found it didn't matter whose God it was, as long as it made sense to me. So that took out, that eliminated some gods. That eliminated trees and
Doorknobs.
Light switches and doorknobs, yeah. Boy, we think of some stupid shit, don't we? So, and I know there's many of us in here whose first step position has been that. Has been the inability to stop, and then we finally get stopped, and then we got to be sober. God, what a horrible word at that point in time. It's better now, isn't it? It changed. Any comments or questions right here? We're going to have to cut you loose to either pee or drink coffee. You got something?
Yeah, you know, when the book describes the first step, it says we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we're alcoholics is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we're like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. You know what the word concede means? It means to give grudgingly. That means you don't have to like it, you just have to do it. And so at some point I have to concede my alcoholism. I mean, I never, what you hear people saying all the time, I didn't grow up wanting to be an alcoholic. But at some point I have to recognize that. And I have to concede it deeply. That means I got to know that's what the deal is. And it's all right. I am delighted to be an alcoholic. I mean, I would have never found this spiritual way of life had I not done this. There are so many benefits to the way I live today, not the least of which is having a meaningful life. And you can have the same thing. You can, at some point, we all come in here with a head full of nonsense about who and what we are. And most of it's bad news. most of it is, I'm not good enough, I'll never be a success, I'll never have a relationship, I'll never do this, I'll never, and it's all lies. Okay? It's just all lies, except it's like dragging an anchor through life. And so we come in here because primarily of our experience and what people have told us, usually as a result of our actions, that we're kind of damaged goods, that we're kind of substandard merchandise. And the truth is that we are children of God. And at some point, if we're ever going to be successful in whatever manner we choose, we've got to come to terms with that. And this program gives us the opportunity to find out what the lies are. And all of those, I'm not good enough, I'll never do this, I'll never do that, I'll never have this, I'll never have that, it's all bullshit. And we really have the opportunity to rise above our history and to become meaningful members of society with real levels of success in any area of our life that we choose. And I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, I'm telling you the truth. All right? So if you really want to get closer to finding out who you are and all those special skills and abilities that God gave every one of you, and you want to clear all of the BS out of the way so you can move forward and to take the risks that will allow you to become successful in whatever you choose to do, then do a little work. All right? Take a risk in finding out who you are. You don't have to hide from that. What you are is not as bad as you think it is. And I can tell you that everything you're embarrassed about having done has probably been done by half the people in this room.
Several times.
Hopefully. So I am struck today. Sometimes I don't even want to go to AA meetings because when people talk in AA meetings, even though they're talking to you about you, they're talking about themselves. And I hear people talk about themselves today, and what you see is a bright, articulate person in front of you who's telling you that they have no chance in life. And there's this huge disconnect. You see one thing and you hear something else, and you're going, no. Why do you believe that? What I see here is different from what you're saying. And it just, I just want to weep in the middle of this and say, please don't spend your whole life thinking that you're damaged. You can rise above all of those things you believe about yourself, but until you find out that they're lies, nothing's going to happen. Because if you believe you can't, you can't. So, and we're going to talk today about how not to do that, and how to change that kind of behavior, and how to find the lie. So, you guys want to go take a break? All right.